Welcome once again to another fantastic episode of the Cronulla Jazz and Blues Festival podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam Simon from Crowdcast, and today our guest is Peter Hadfield OAM, and he's there with his band, Johnny Rudge Band, when we head to Cronulla, but he's an Olympian, he's an Olympic commentator, 7 Olympics, so on. So he's very interesting. We had another Olympian last year. We had Damien Keogh on the show last year, his band, Shake and Bake, and they're also going to be at the festival, and obviously basketball fame. And we have this amazing Olympian with us today who's crossed into the music world. So please join me in welcoming Peter Hadfield from the Johnny Rudge Band. Peter, how are you going?
Thanks very much, Adam. Pleasure to be with you. Yeah, it's a long time ago, my Olympic career, but I competed at 2 Olympics in Moscow in 1980 and Los Angeles in 1984 in the decathlon. But my music career started before then. I actually started playing guitar, or actually mandolin, when I was eight years old. And then when I was in my teens, my dad had a friend who was a saxophone player in a band, and I think from the time I was about 14, I started to play in his middle-of-the-road band at places like the Bankstown Business Club, and Dad had to drive me and then take me into the back room, keep me away from the poker machines. And when I started to get involved seriously in athletics, the guitar basically stayed in the case. But I suppose my favourite story was in my early guitar. I actually played in a Tijuana brass band when I was about 13 or 14, and we did a series on New Faces with Bernard King on Channel 10. And there was a producer there who thought I was a reasonable sort of guitarist. He made an introduction to George Goller, the famous jazz guitarist.
Wow.
And so I learnt from George for about 4 years in the back end of my teens. And then I did 3 years of classical guitar with, and then went back to and practiced or studied again with George. So, I had a pretty involved music career. Yeah. And then when I hit about 20 and got really seriously involved in athletics, the lifestyle of a muso and the lifestyle of an athlete didn't quite mix. So the guitar stayed in the case for about 12 or 14 years.
It's so let's confirm this. You know what you're doing when it comes to music, so it's a great start. Where did a Tijuana brass band? Was that in Sydney? You were in that
band?
Yeah.
Where
did you play? Like, where were you playing gigs?
Well, it was interesting. I used to live in a southern suburb of Sydney called Engadine, and there was a school there it was called Boys Town. It was similar to the Boys Town in the United States, run by the Catholic Brothers, and they had a music program, and it was mostly brass, and they had a drummer, had a bass player, but they needed a guitarist. So I'm not sure how they tracked me down, but they did. And so we used to play. As I said, we played on New Faces, and we were picked up. We played a stack of corporate gigs for companies like Walton's back in the day. So we did all sorts of corporate gigs. We really didn't play around town at all. We did all these corporate gigs, and but I used to play. I probably played three nights a week in my late high school and then early university days, and then, as I said, packed the guitar away for over a decade.
Hearing Waltons, and I'm hearing Bernard King, and I'm just getting flashbacks all over the shop, and Bailey McBride Furniture and Venture, all these places. And
I'm very old, Adam.
That's better. I remember all these places you'd talk references you're making. Bernard King used to have the bangles on, and he was quite camp and so on, quite over the top. And when Bert and Bernard were on doing New Faces, that was always very entertaining. Back in the day, Bert was doing all the double entendre stuff and so on, and the cheekiness of it. So Bernard was quite a great character. So where was the affinity? Did the affinity always come to jazz and blues and that type of genre for you, or did it go through a period of time as you grew and developed?
I think as a kid, you always kind of played the modern music of the time, but because of George's influence, I certainly went down that jazz path, and then blues is I guess the root of jazz as well. So there's quite a synergy between jazz and blues. I really enjoyed playing that type of music. And when I was learning from Don Andrews, he used to have a whole stack of jazz guitar solos that he arranged, some real old standards, and they were all chord solos. So I used to meticulously go through all of these arrangements with him. And George used to give me arrangements, and then every now and again George would have somebody like Don Burrows or Ed Gaston, because I used to have my lessons at George Goller's place. So I was really, and then just from then on, I just really enjoyed playing and listening to jazz. So it was really a matter of following that through.
I used to have a music teacher, and ask you the question he used to ask me. He would say, "Boys, is jazz improvisation and blues innovation, or is it back to front? What do you think? Is jazz side of the things innovation or improvisation, and blues is the other one?"
I think they're both innovation and improvisation. Sort of listen to some of the really old blues numbers, Muddy Waters, and those guys, and there's real innovation as part of that. And then a lot of the jazz, I guess, chord progressions and what have you are based around a similar blues treatment. That 12 bars, 3 chords is the basis of it, and then you kind of throw in all of these diminished and 13ths and ninths and what have you, which gives it that more of a jazz feel. So I guess one of the benefits of playing and learning at quite a young age, and also learning with George, he was a real stickler for reading music and sight reading, and I guess it's apparently it's a bit unusual for guitarists to read and certainly to sight read. But the beauty of that is you can almost throw down a chart and pretty much play it. I think when I was certainly in my late teens, when I was right at the back end of playing my clubs before I got involved in the athletics seriously, I could almost read music as easily as I could read a book. And we used to, when we worked in the clubs, you'd get the Deltones or somebody would come in as the guest artist with the house band, and they'd bring in 2 sets of charts and say, "Okay, boys, this is what we're going to play. This is how the first set goes. This is how the second set goes," and then you'd have to play them pretty much perfectly straight away without any rehearsing. So I appreciate the fact that I had that grounding and that background, and since I retired from athletics after the 84 Olympics, I still kept in shape, and I still do, and I turned 70 this year. But the beauty of the guitar is something you can just you can pick up, and I pretty much play every day. And then Johnny Rudge, our band, we've been together now for about 4 years, but we've only probably played half a dozen gigs. But we jam every week, and we've probably got 100 or more songs that we've got in our collective set now. And we listen to a song or we hear a song, we think, oh, that'd be good. And then we've always been pretty much an instrumental band. Anthony Gullick, our keyboard player, sings a bit, but he reckons he's the best of a bad bunch as far as a vocalist goes. But we've got me on guitar. Anthony plays keyboard. Greg Allen is on bass, and we just jam as a trio. And then when we're doing a gig, Anthony's got a lot of contacts in the music world. He used to play in the Ed Wilson big band. He played trumpet, and he also played trumpet with James Morrison, and he was the music director for one of the local high schools and took stage bands to School Spectacular. He kind of knows a lot of people in the business. So we've had guys like Warren Trout, drum for us, and for the Cronulla Jazz Festival, we've got Gordon Rittmister, he's probably one of the most sought after drummers in the country as far as a session muso and playing, with a whole stack of different people. So we kind of think we're punching above our weight with the drummers that we bring in, but it's always good fun to play with excellent musicians.
And I've seen in the past you've also had Paul Green.
Paul,
Olympian.
Paul and I have done a number of collaborations where Paul will bring his band and they'll play a set, we'll play a set, and then we'll kind of collaborate together. So he hasn't technically been a member of the band, but we have played a lot of gigs together. and he's been a full-time artist for a lot of years. I guess I'm a blow-in. I've been a media and PR person for the last 40 years, and I just play guitar I've never had to make a living out of it. I would think I would have starved to death if I did, but it's been. I was certainly good pocket money in the day when I was in high school and at university, but we just enjoy playing, and we enjoy the opportunity of playing in front of an audience. So we're hoping we get a big one down there on Sunday for the Jazz and Blues Festival.
Do you think the discipline you had as a musician growing up, learning and growing, then into sport, and then ultimately back into music, does the discipline cross over? Does it help you? Does it help you stay focused on that, and are there crossover skills that you learn from both you can bring to both careers?
Oh, I think definitely. When I was first learning, when I was in early high school and even late primary school, I had the discipline to, before I went to school, I would practice for half an hour, 40 minutes, pretty much every day, and then practice a little bit on the weekend. So there was almost this discipline of playing every day, and not just noodling around, having some sort of goal or focus to work on, so that I was going to work on this particular element or this particular song or pull this arrangement together. And you need that same discipline in sport. You need to say, okay, I need a plan. I need to work out the sorts of training I need to do. I need all of these objectives and goals, but then you need to actually get off your bum and actually do all the hard work. And you listen to some really top guitarist, somebody like Tommy Emmanuel or whatever, and they just practice for hours and hours and hours every day, and so it becomes a routine, but also becomes a joy. I know quite a few guitarists now, and they're professional guitarists, and they're playing all of the time, but they said they allocate sometimes 3 hours a day to they're performing. They go through a lot of technical practice where they might be just doing scales or what have you, but also they spend a lot of time I guess improving their craft in arranging and composition and those sorts of things. So to be good, you need to be very, very disciplined. And I guess I'd like to think that I keep that discipline that I developed as a young musician, and then as an athlete kept that going, and I still keep that going.
I was thinking, leading up to the festival, I'd love to see down in the Shire all these posters. Who is Johnny Rudge? And sort of build the mystery and the mystique around it and so on. Who is Johnny Rudge? How did the band come together? Where'd the name come from?
Okay, well, the band really came together, as I said, our keyboard player, his primary industry was keyboard, but Anthony Gullick started playing in local brass bands. His dad was actually in the Navy, in the Navy band.
Right.
And he had an early involvement in music. He did a trade and then didn't particularly like that. So he actually went back to school and back to university and became a music teacher. And he, where Anthony and I met, was he taught at my local high school. I lived down in Gymea Bay in the south of Sydney, and he was a music teacher at Kirrawee, and our 3 kids went there. And our son and daughter played in a jazz stage band that Anthony created, and my daughter went to Cuba with a school excursion.
Wow.
To play over there in a number of festivals. And so Anthony and I, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we started off basically as just getting together. We were playing Bach duets and we'd do a few little jazz things and what have you. And we've developed quite a few different sorts of music playing. And then my full-time job until I retired 4.5 years ago, the back end of it, I was the senior media advisor for Sydney Water. And one of the senior managers there who led the research team and the strategy team was a guy called Greg Allen, who was a mad keen bass guitarist. And we sometimes have a chat at work about music and what have you. And I said to Anthony, because we'd been playing together for a bit, I know a good bass player is probably keen. So we formed this trio, and Greg's got a music studio in his place at Newtown. So we go in there every week, and we have a jam for about 2 or 3 hours. And as I said, we put together a whole series of songs, and the name Johnny Rudge is kind of very obtuse. Anthony is remarkable with his hands. He actually renovates and rejuvenates vintage motorbikes, and he can make parts on lathes for them and what have you. And so the Johnny Rudge came up because of a gig that we were playing about 2 years ago, and we didn't have a band name at that stage. And he'd actually just been pulling together some old motorbike parts, and he said, there's a Judge vintage motorbike, and their mascot is Johnny Rudge. So he said, why don't we have that as their name? So that's about as relevant as Johnny Rudge is to music. It's a mascot of a vintage motorbike. So it always takes a bit of explaining, but anyway, it's a name.
Those great names always have great stories, like where the Doors came from the famous passage, there are things unknown and known in between of the doors, and how things like how Apple was come up with as a brand. So all these things are fascinating. It's much more creative to do something like that, and obviously being in marketing, you understand what creativity is, and rather than sitting there and go, I'm going to call the band Peter Hadfield and the Boys. It's no offense to anyone who's in a band called the Boys, but it's got to be like that and so on. But you must have seen, and if I can ask you to put your marketing hat on for a little bit as well, and I apologise you're in retirement, but I'm going to draw on that experience. I've seen you've won awards in that sector as well. How hard is it now for musicians? You've been through the musician for a while. How hard is it now for musicians with technology, which sometimes makes things better? Do you think it's harder now for musicians, especially young musicians, up-and-coming musicians, keep up with the things? Because a lot of musicians I talk to, it's almost like social media and all that is almost a full-time job to keep that going actively. How do you think from a marketing standpoint musicians and young artists can keep up with those types of trends?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly tough. You look at the technology. I guess it's much tougher now to actually earn a living or a decent living out of being a musician. Back when I was, I'm talking over 50 years ago, I could have worked pretty much every night of the week if you needed to in a band, and you got paid reasonably good money back then. And then I suppose you came through the period where you had to be signed up with a record company if you were going to do well. But now the artists of today need to be producers as well as musicians, and then they also need to then conquer the realm of social media to be able to get their message out there and get their name out there. And I suppose it's a bit easier once you're on top of the technology, if you know how to use it and to be able to create music and create tracks and those sorts of things, which can then get out to a major part of the population. But the marketing of that, the production is easy, but the marketing of that is incredibly difficult. And the thing that amazes me is the number of followings that a lot of the younger artists now are able to create because of their uniqueness in the music that they play, but also in their flair of that marketing through the new realms of social media. I understand it a bit, but I'm okay at creating content for social media, but then on how to actually get it out to the masses, I've got no idea, and have to ask a young person who's expertise in that to be able to help me to do it.
But even if you learn something, so on technology moves like that, so you might spend 12 months mastering Instagram or something like that, or your social media, then all of a sudden there's a new announcement, there's a new update, you've got to relearn again. The algorithms change like that, so it's a big challenge.
It is a big challenge, but I guess the thing is that if you're passionate about it, you're prepared to do what it takes to then retrain yourself to be able to cope with those changes in the technology. And I suppose it's a bit like an old person like me. We had no understanding at all of Instagram or Facebook or social media or any of those sorts of things. But now we all do it. We all use the medium all the time. We may not be experts in it, but we're getting better and better all the time. And I guess it's a bit the same as when you look at, as a guitarist back in the day, I had a guitar and an amplifier, and then I might have had a guitar and an amplifier and a very basic, effects pedal, like a wah-wah pedal or a fuzz box or something like that. And now you start to look at the technologies that are available through the digital realm, where you can make yourself sound like any musical instrument or sound like an entire orchestra or what have you. And I guess the thing that's been good for me is that before I really got involved with Anthony and Greg, I was still playing pretty much every day, and I would just go onto YouTube, and I could have a jam with Santana, or I could have a jam with Eric Clapton, or whatever. So that made life much more interesting for me as a guitarist, to be able to play with other musos and also learn from the sorts of things that they played. And it's all there on YouTube.
Talking about playing and celebration, I mean, we could talk for hours about that. That's one of my pastimes, and so I'm bothering people about technology. You're going to be down, as say, Cronulla Jazz and Blues Festival, Sunday, 1st of June. Cronulla RSL, kicking off at 3 o'clock. What can we expect from Johnny Rudge? Give me some idea. What can we get to get people there, get bums on seats? Because I also see a certain gentleman by the name of Paul Green's following you. So let's start with Johnny Rudge first. What can the fans expect from your show?
Well, as I said, we're actually playing a full instrumental set. But we're pretty eclectic. We play some straight blues, so we'll do some sort of Clapton type style blues. We do a number of guitar bass sort of jazz things that, say, from Wes Montgomery or Pat Metheny or George Benson. We do a few jazz arrangements of some Beatles songs. So we do a good arrangement of Blackbird and then Eleanor Rigby, but with a real jazz feel. So and then even a Miles Davis song that we've rearranged for guitar as lead rather than as trumpet as lead. So it's a real eclectic mix. We're playing for an hour from 3 o'clock. And one of the songs that we've added to the list was suggested to me pretty much by my 2-year-old grandson, who's mad keen about the animated movie Sing, and the closing song in that is Mina, the elephant character, sings with Tori's voice the Stevie Wonder song, "Don't You Worry About a Thing," but we've done a real jazz, sort of funky arrangement of that, just again for guitar, keyboards, bass and drums. So I think we've said there's a bit in it for everybody. There's some straight jazz stuff, there's some straight blues stuff, but there's a lot of different arrangements, and even we've even done an arrangement of the Disney song from Snow White, "Whistle While You Work," but we've done it as a real sort of funky sound as well. So if you're into jazz and into blues and into instrumental jazz and blues, then come down. And the club, the RSL club at Cronulla, has got the world's best view as well. So
I was literally about to say, if this is a nice day, it's not going to rain like last year. We've spoken to the man upstairs, but this is going to be a beautiful room to play. 3 o'clock, you're just going to be heading into that sunset. Great big room. It's going to be great. We can grab a meal, catch up with friends, and certainly get to enjoy some instrumental and really listen and relax and take a seat back and on, because it's a busy four days down at Cronulla we've got here. But that time of day, I'm going to be looking for a ginger beer maybe and a sit down and just to enjoy some light jazz and enjoy some different interpretations. And you mentioned Pat Metheny before. How many people this week have said to me, Pat Metheny? I haven't listened to Pat Metheny for so long. And then you just said Wes Montgomery too. It's like, I've got vinyl here I haven't opened. I've got to get that out too. So you prompted my Wes Montgomery afternoon this afternoon. But certainly it's going to be a great afternoon to get together. I want to ask you the final question I asked, but I want to put a twist on it. I always ask musicians what it feels like to be on stage. I want to twist in your Olympic career as well as your music career. Is there a difference to being on a grand, like you're in Los Angeles, for God's sakes, a massive Olympic, and Moscow with all the issues going on there as well? Is there a difference to being on a grand stage for a sporting event or as to say for a musical event? Is it the same rush?
I think it's definitely the similar sort of rush. slightly smaller crowds listening to Johnny Rudge than at the Olympic. I think in Moscow there was 110,000 in the stadium and 80,000 in the LA Coliseum. But yeah, the same rush. I think the culmination of preparing and then being able to put all of that training and the time that you spend in to actually put that in front of an audience, and then hopefully perform well and get the appreciation of the crowd in the athletic stadium or the crowd at a gig somewhere. So it's the same sort of rush, and I guess that's. We don't perform all that much, but every now and again we need, I guess, that motivation and that adrenaline kick of just putting what we're doing in practice over a series of weeks or months, and then performing on stage. And my hat goes out to Jeff Trio and the team for putting this together. It's an amazing effort to have over 100 artists over 15 stages over four days. And Jeff, I've known Jeff for quite a few years now, and I thank him for the opportunity of being able to play. I've emceed a few stages for him in the past, but to be able to play at the Jazz Festival, Jazz and Blues Festival, it's going to be an absolute delight. I'm looking forward to be able to do that, and also to catch up with a few of the musos that we know, and see Paul Green, who's following us after our set.
Fantastic. Well, as I said, you've got to be there Sunday, 1st of June, RSL, Johnny Rudge, featuring the man himself, Peter Hadfield, and his mates, all getting together, going to share their passion, their love. And it's one thing that's this mystery we call music, and keeps us alive, I think, a lot of days, and dark days like we had last year. It poured rain for 3 or 4 days that we still persevered on, and it was 3 or 4 of the most memorable days we've ever had in a very long career. Peter, thank you so much for your time today. We look forward to seeing you and the rest of the guys. Johnny Rudge is the band's name. Who is Johnny Rudge? Well, this is part of it here. So to find out the rest of them, their sounds, you've got to get down to Cronulla RSL, which means in turn, you've got to get down to the Cronulla Jazz and Blues Festival, May 28th to the 1st of June. And while you're liking and looking around online, make sure you like, follow and subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you down in Cronulla at the festival. Peter, thanks so much. Have a great time. We'll see you in Cronulla.
Thanks, Adam. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.